Okay, so we're going to pace ourselves, and I'll do it. You can participate as well, of course. My take on the day of American pop culture. This is like Disneyland for American adults sitting around the TV drinking probably far too much. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go at the not so obvious. Almost everything that was not so obvious. The obvious is fairly easy, so I'm going to go after the not so obvious, including, and it may make your face hurt, and I really don't care, including what I think is the biggest thing that didn't happen that's not so obvious, that should be so obvious during the Super Bowl. I'll also do a quick, I'll make it fast, even though I could drag it out for a couple hours probably. I'll do the Jeff Ward ad meter. I think I can explain some that was good, not much. Some that was bad, a lot. A lot that was very, very vanilla, and it was done on purpose, which is unfortunate, but I've got the Jeff Ward ad meter. And somewhere along the way, I can splash in some nerdy football talk. So, all right. I'm not going to rehash the obvious. The obvious from the Chiefs' Super Bowl win. That's done, can be done, will be done over and over and over again. I'll point out the significant, the not so obvious, the significant things that are maybe not so obvious that I think are more interesting. There were significant things that happened in the game, around the game, in the broadcast about the game, and then the most significant thing that didn't happen in the game at all, but probably should have. The obvious we all get. The Kansas City Chiefs are a dynasty. 3 in 5 years settles that. First repeat champion since 2004 and 5, blah, 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 blah. It's not just Patrick Mahomes. I said it before the Super Bowl, said it in November, said it in probably January. They won the Super Bowl just like they won the entire playoff run because they're really, really good defensive team. They make few mistakes, although in the first half they made a few. They're a really, really good defensive team that people don't appreciate because people just don't appreciate defense. They have the second best quarterback of all time and maybe the second best coach of all time. They didn't have a 1,000-yard receiver. They didn't have a 1,000-yard rusher. Travis Kelce's near the end of his career, and they were missing an all-pro guard who, by the way, was the only all-pro they had on offense. They won because they gave up 22 points. They gave up, on average, during the year, 21 points. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. If you have a pretty good quarterback and you give up only 21 points a game, you do well. If you have the second best quarterback to ever play the game and you only give up 21 points a game, you'll end up being Super Bowl champions. They scored 25 last night. This has been repeated all year long. It's the real story. They scored 25 last night. They scored 27 against Buffalo in the playoffs. They scored 26 against Miami in the playoffs. They gave up 24 to the Bills and 7 to the Dolphins and 22 last night. Patrick Mahomes is the GOAT in waiting. How's that? I don't know if he'll ever be the GOAT, the best of all time, but he's the one in waiting. He just tied Joe Montana for Super Bowl MVPs. He's only 28. Again, this is the obvious part. I'm about to get to the not so obvious. Tom Brady has 5. I think we could argue everyone is doing it. It'll go on for a while. I think you can probably put him ahead of Joe Montana at this point. I think he's done Montana-like stuff over and over again. He passed for 333 last night. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. But he rushed for 66. And it's not just that. It's when he rushed for 66. Here's why I think he's second to Brady now. I don't even think this is that much of an argument, but fine. The Chiefs were down 19-16 with 1:53 left, and he takes them 64 yards on 11 plays. And there's not anyone with a pulse that didn't think it was going to happen, probably including the San Francisco 49ers. They tied it to take it to overtime. The only question when the ball is back in his hands, like Brady, was, are they just going to win it outright? It wasn't a question of can he get down there and kick a field goal. In overtime, he takes him 75 yards on 11 plays. He converts on a fourth down. He rushes for 27 yards on that drive. They get a walk-off score, 3 seconds left. They win 25-22. Here are the two things, the maybe not so obvious about Patrick Mahomes. It's everything you need to know about this guy's career. In 3 Super Bowl wins, each time the Chiefs have been behind by double digits. They were down 20-10 to the 49ers, I guess, 4 years ago. It's 24-14 last year, and at one point it was 10-0 last night against San Francisco. This is even more important. This tells you everything. In their 3 Super Bowl wins, while Mahomes has been the quarterback, they have 9 touchdowns and 2 field goals after the third quarter. Think about that. They flip a switch. He flips a switch. In the 3 championships they've won, start of the fourth quarter, they have 9 touchdowns and 2 field goals. That's everything. He closes people, right? Everybody knows it's just like with Brady. If the ball is in his hands and it's near the end, they'll win. The significant things that I don't think will be talked about enough, I find more interesting than just sort of, arguing back and forth about the greatness of Mahomes. That's not tough to do. The very overtime rule that you can't say the Chiefs created it, but it was partly because of it was because of the Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. The very rule created around the Chiefs is the very overtime rule that allowed them to win last night. Pre-2022, they lose last night 22-19. The Chiefs beat the Bills 2 years ago in what we knew was significant at the time. We knew the fallout would be significant at the time. We had no idea 2 years later it would decide a Super Bowl with that team. But that is exactly what happened. There is so much contained into the overtime, good and bad. The bad's coming. So the Chiefs beat the Bills 2 years ago. But out of that is the rule change. They scored at the time. Remember, they scored first in overtime. The game ended. Everyone freaked out for pretty good reason. This is the genius of the NFL. They'll just pivot and make up a new rule to make the game better, and they did it. So everyone freaked out and said, that's not right. The coin toss in a game like this of Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes going back and forth in one of the greatest offensive games of all time. Different Chiefs team then. They won that way then. They win a different way now. But everyone freaks out and says that's not right. The coin toss decided this game. Josh Allen, who was just as good as Mahomes that night, he needs the ball too. So, rule was changed. Last night, each team would get a possession. The only way the game would have ended on one possession in overtime was in the case of a safety. The 49ers kicked a field goal on their possession. If both teams were tied after one possession, then the game goes to sudden death. The first team that scores wins. That's significant because at one point last night, Kyle Shanahan, who's about to get trashed by me, made a point that I don't think people quite understood. He was mumbling. He was embarrassed. I think he is shell-shocked. He's now labeled. Said something about, the third possession. What he was referring to, I assume, is, hey, the third possession is sudden death. We're going to get there. Then there's the interesting part. Had Kansas City faced 4th and goal, in overtime, would they have kicked the field goal or were they gone for the win? Or gone for the 7 in overtime? They scored on a 3rd and 3 play to win. Would another coach done something differently? Maybe. I bet so. Think about that. I mean, the trend of the NFL this year would be a team might have just gone for it. The head coach of the Detroit Lions would have. It didn't matter. They convert on 3rd down. Okay, Kyle Shanahan, the head coach of the 49ers, is significant and not for very good reasons. He's now lost in every Super Bowl. He was calling plays when Atlanta was ahead of New England 28-3, and the Falcons got beat. It was a train wreck of offensive play calling. He's now had double-digit leads twice against the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowls, and he's lost them both. The criticism that it's probably started already, but it'll get ramped up. The criticism that will get ramped up today, one is legitimate. One form of criticism I think is legitimate. The other I think is unfair. I think it's wrong. It's going to go like this. First, San Francisco wins the coin flip in overtime. They elected to receive. No, that's not a wise thing to do. That's the wrong thing to do. You know how we know it's the wrong thing to do? Because the Chiefs had already said, wow, we talk about that all the time. Here's why it's the wrong thing to do. The smart thing to do is to defend. Okay, they're indoors, so there's no wind, but you defend because you want the ball second because you know what you need to do scoring-wise in overtime to win. That changes your outlook entirely. It changes your play calling. It changes your perspective. It changes everything. There's no reason not to take that position. I don't agree with taking the ball first in the current overtime setup. It has made a lot of people now question, for good reason, because many of the 49ers players have now come forward saying they didn't know the overtime rules. I kind of believe them, and it does make you wonder if the coach knew. It's a mistake. I mean, is it the reason they lost? No, but it's a mistake. It's not. It's a peek inside. It's pulling the curtain back, and it's like, hey, bud, you really don't know what you're doing. So, Patrick Mahomes and many other Chiefs players, of course, were asked about, what you do in that situation now that overtime rules have changed. I mean, this is a relatively new thing that doesn't come up that much. And they all said, well, we talk about this all the time. Mahomes even said, well, gosh, I want to know what the other team is doing. He's also getting hammered, and I don't agree with this one. He's getting hammered. Kyle Shanahan's getting hammered for the field goal in overtime when you know Patrick Mahomes is on the other sideline. True. I think we all know, he knows, players know, someone picking up the trash knows. If Mahomes, when he gets the ball back, it's going to be like Brady, it's going to be like Montana, they're going to score. True. But I don't think the wrong thing to do by the 49ers in overtime was kick a field goal. I don't think you go for it. I don't think you try to convert fourth down. I think you take the points when you can get the points and deal with it after that. Now, his decision at the coin toss was incorrect. I don't think the decision to take 3 points was incorrect. To take a 3-point lead in overtime, knowing that Patrick Mahomes now knows what he has to do. And he did it. They cruised down the field perfectly. Andy Reid even said the drive in overtime was perfection. The play call was perfection. But I still think Shanahan has to take 3 points there. I don't agree with everyone screaming. Dan Campbell of the Lions did that stuff and they lost. So you take points when you can get points. It's that simple. If you don't convert, you've given Patrick. So if you go for it on fourth down and you don't convert, you've just given Patrick Mahomes the game. You've given him the game. You've given him a short field, and he needs only 3 points, and that's crazy. Now, Kyle Shanahan now has a label. And it's going to be miserable, and it is what it is. And he has had double-digit leads in 3 Super Bowls, and he's lost all 3. He's had that game last night, had sketchy decisions made on his part. His team didn't play badly in the first half, had a bad break on a fumble in the first half. A ball just hit a guy who was blocking. That stuff happens. That's an unforced error. But, when people look back, and for good reason, they will, you shouldn't have that many all-pro players and lose. You shouldn't make stupid decisions and end up losing. He did. He's going to get labeled. The other significant thing that was weird, and I sent out a tweet about this, was the betting. The betting. Not the prop bets and stuff like that. It was just the overall betting about the game was weird from day one, and then it was really weird the day before the game and the day of the game. So the line had San Francisco favored from the very beginning, which is weird. They hadn't played well enough, and nobody in their right mind bets against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. You just don't. But from the very beginning, the 49ers were favored. They end up at kickoff time, I believe it was a 1.5 to 2 point spread still. Most of the bets, something like 65 to 70% of the bets came in for the Chiefs. But the big money bets, of which there were several $100,000 to $200,000 bets that came in the morning of the game, all the giant bets went to San Francisco. Now, usually whales and big money people that come in late know what they're doing, and they got it all wrong. Almost all, what was reported on game day, what was reported was that almost all the big bets went to San Francisco. That's just weird. I don't know. That's surprising. It never balanced out. The line just didn't change a heck of a lot. Then, and this will take some explaining, and I'll do it, the most significant thing about the game was the thing that didn't happen. And I can't believe, I guess lost in pop culture, I can't believe it's not being talked about more.